he's perfectionist, as almost everyone we've discussed would fall into that personality characteristic. They're a perfectionist, but I mean on a more provable level. I mean, you know, it's different.
Hollywood has always adored Jack Nicholson's wicked grin and larger-than-life personality. But at 88, the three-time Oscar winner who redefined what it meant to be a movie star is back in the headlines, and this time, it isn't for a comeback.
He already attacked me in the lobby. He's never forgiven me for playing this part. But my contact with him first was not as an actor, because as a semi-working actor.
Reports claim Nicholson allegedly named 6 actors he truly hated, and the list has shocked fans. Were these grudges real, or just Hollywood gossip gone wild? The dark side of stardom. Hollywood has 2 faces, and Jack Nicholson knew both of them well. One face is bright, full of cameras and applause. The other is darker, the one that turns success into a battlefield. The higher you climb, the more eyes follow, waiting for you to slip. For Nicholson, fame wasn't merely a reward, it was a test. And every move he made was watched, judged, and talked about. In that world, friendships can turn into rivalries overnight, and a small issue can grow into something you carry for years. Nicholson thrived in that high-pressure world, but he didn't leave it unchanged. His perfectionism was legendary, and he was known to keep working until a scene felt real, no matter how long it took. This drive gave the world unforgettable performances, but it also made him a tough man to share a set with, just as we mentioned earlier. His piercing stare, often described as equal parts charm and challenge, could push a co-star to give their best, or make them wish they were working somewhere else. That spark of beautiful madness in his eyes kept everyone guessing what version of Jack Nicholson they would get that day. He wasn't easy to pin down. Nicholson never fit neatly into one school of acting. He could dive deep like a method actor, then turn around and say he was still fooling everyone. His attitude made him unpredictable and sometimes hard to work with. When actors who took a slower, more methodical approach ended up across from him, the differences could turn a simple rehearsal into a clash of wills. The room could go from professional to personal faster than anyone expected. In some cases, those clashes made their way into public view. Over the years, a few co-stars called him arrogant or difficult, and interviews have revealed moments where he left people feeling pushed aside. These weren't just small rumors, they became part of the stories around him. For every award and glowing review, there were stories of tense sets and heated moments. It was proof that brilliance and friction often walked hand in hand. Nicholson's temper didn't stay locked behind studio doors either. One of the most famous incidents happened in 1994, when he was accused of smashing another driver's car with a golf club during a traffic argument. The charges went away after Nicholson apologized and settled it, but the story stuck. It became an example people pointed to whenever talk turned to his fiery personality, and all that intensity came at a cost. His devotion to the work sometimes left personal relationships strained or broken. He spent years pouring himself into characters while sacrificing time with loved ones. The privacy he valued so much became harder to protect, and headlines often told more of his story than he wanted the world to know. Nicholson himself has admitted that the life he chose came with trade-offs, and he seemed willing to live with them if it meant chasing the art that defined him. Still, it's hard to talk about Nicholson without acknowledging the other side of that coin. The same man who could snap under pressure could also deliver moments of genius no one else could touch. Hollywood may have winced at some of his antics, but it kept rewarding him because what he brought to the screen was worth it. The truth about Nicholson is complicated because even icons have their breaking points, and even legends have grudges. And some of his grudges may have lasted far longer than anyone expected. The 6 actors who made his personal blacklist are the last ones you'd think he'd clash with. Coming up at number 6. 6. Shelley Duvall, The Shining haunting aftermath. Shelley Duvall's time on The Shining has taken on a life of its own, a story that is always talked about every time the film is mentioned. One question still hangs over that set is, did Jack Nicholson do enough for his co-star when the production turned grueling? You see, critics have noted that Nicholson never publicly pushed back against Stanley Kubrick's treatment of Duvall, and that silence has stayed attached to his name. It doesn't make him a villain, but it does shape how people remember those endless months and who shouldered the weight of that famous shoot. Kubrick's directing style is where this story darkens. Multiple accounts describe marathon shooting schedules, emotional breakdowns, and an exhausting number of takes that left Duvall physically and mentally drained. She's spoken about crying on set day after day, running until her body hurts and feeling completely wrung out by the end of it. Behind-the-scenes footage filmed by Kubrick's daughter shows a demanding director with an exhausted actress, and that material has been replayed for decades as evidence that the shoot took a personal toll on Shelley Duvall. Currently, it is hard to watch the movie without wondering how much of Wendy Torrance's terror, played by Duvall, was real. Nicholson's role in this atmosphere was far more complicated. He seemed to thrive under Kubrick's perfectionism, feeding off the intensity and channeling it straight into Jack Torrance, which was the role he played. Kubrick praised his focus and his energy, which only added to the perception that Nicholson was sailing through a storm that nearly sank his co-star. There are no clear accounts of him stepping in to defend her or slow the process down. Some who were there later described the set as a place where the men held the power, and no one questioned Kubrick's methods. Duvall's own words even add more shades to this picture. She admitted that she sometimes felt jealous of Nicholson, frustrated that the crew and Kubrick seemed to shower him with attention while she felt pushed aside. At the same time, she called Nicholson a rock, someone who would sit with her, talk about acting, and occasionally help her through the day. This mix of resentment and respect makes their relationship one of the more complicated actor pairings in film history. They weren't enemies, but they weren't entirely on the same island either. Nicholson, for his part, has since acknowledged that Duvall had what he called the toughest job of any actor he'd seen under those conditions. He recognized that Kubrick was relentless with her, and even admired her ability to withstand it. Yet that acknowledgement years later doesn't erase the question that lingers. Could he have done more in the moment? Or would speaking out have changed nothing and possibly even hurt the production? What makes this so haunting is that The Shining is celebrated as one of the greatest horror films ever made, and Duvall's performance is a major reason why. Her unraveling on screen is unforgettable, and maybe because some of it was real. This reality forces audiences to look at the film differently. Can a masterpiece still be celebrated if it came at such a personal cost to the person who made it unforgettable? The question refuses to go away, and probably that's why the story of Nicholson, Duvall, and Kubrick still feels unfinished. Of course, Shelley Duvall's story isn't the only one that has followed Nicholson over the years. There is another name that comes up whenever people talk about his most complicated relationships on set. And this one might surprise you. Patti Miloš Forman. When Jack Nicholson and director Miloš Forman teamed up for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, the collaboration became a cinematic brilliance. Behind the scenes, however, the chemistry between Nicholson and director Miloš Forman wasn't really going well. The friction wasn't marked by public outbursts, but by creative clashes and unspoken rifts. One of the earliest signs of discord appeared during discussions about the character that Nicholson was to play, which was Randall McMurphy's entrance into the ward. Foreman envisioned a scene where the patients were already in an uproar upon McMurphy's arrival, setting the tone for his disruptive character. In contrast, Nicholson advocated for a quieter entrance, believing that McMurphy's true impact would be felt through his interactions rather than an immediate disturbance. This disagreement reportedly persisted for weeks, straining their communication and highlighting different directorial visions. Another point of contention arose from Foreman's decision to withhold dailies from the cast. Now, dailies are the footage shot each day, and Nicholson, accustomed to reviewing his performances to refine his craft, found this approach unsettling. The lack of immediate feedback left him uncertain about his portrayal of McMurphy. Producer Michael Douglas intervened, requesting that Foreman show some footage to alleviate the cast's concerns, suggesting that the withholding of dailies had created unease among the actors. As the production progressed, the distance between Nicholson and Foreman grew. Rather than speaking directly to him, Nicholson often communicated through their cinematographer, Haskell Wexler. The choice to bypass direct conversation made it seem like there was subtle mistrust or frustration, a signal that their creative visions were not fully aligned. Despite these tensions, the story never spilled into outright conflict. There are no records of arguments that disrupted the set or long-term resentment between the two men. Most accounts come from retrospective interviews and anecdotes from people close to the production. Nicholson never publicly condemned Foreman, and the director never openly criticized Nicholson, leaving the relationship framed more as professional friction than personal enmity. Ultimately, the friction between Nicholson and Foreman did not derail the film's success. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest went on to win 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Actor for Nicholson. The film's critical acclaim overshadowed the behind-the-scenes tensions, cementing its place as a cinematic masterpiece. Yet, the subtle discord between its star and director shows that even in the pursuit of artistic excellence, creative differences can cast long shadows. Just when you think Nicholson's story with directors ends there, another collaboration takes the spotlight, and it's not the kind of story you'd expect. 4. Cher. Side comments. It all started with a phone call Cher says she'll never forget. Now, this is a story about how The Witches of Eastwick was filmed. Cher recalled that director George Miller called and said he and Jack Nicholson thought she was too old and not hot enough for the role she was in to play. Those words, coming out of nowhere, cut deep. They turned what should have been a simple casting conversation into a moment that exposed how casually image and age can be weaponized in Hollywood. However, Cher didn't take the insult lightly. Despite the fact that she felt heartbroken, her response was quick and unforgettable. She reminded them who she was, listed her achievements, and made it clear she wasn't going to be erased from the set. This small act of defiance changed the story. Not only did she get the part, but she turned a dismissal into a personal victory over an industry that often tries to decide when a woman's time is up. The tension was still there, though, hanging in the air as filming began. Anyone would think that Cher and Nicholson would clash once they began filming. Surprisingly, the clash never happened. Over time, that early sting gave way to an odd sort of friendship. In an interview, when asked about Jack Nicholson, Cher shared stories about the thoughtful gifts he sent her. She also went ahead to say, "He's a love. I've known him my whole adult life. He is more amazing than people think he is, and so kind. And he loves women. Actually, he loves hanging out with women. He painted a little bull for me for my birthday because we are both Tauruses. Taurus people rule." It's a detail that feels more intimate than the original issue, suggesting a relationship that grew years after they even left the movie set. What Nicholson himself thought of that phone call remains a mystery. He never confirmed or denied Cher's version of events, and the fact that he's quiet about it leaves a gap in the story that makes it even more intriguing. Was it really a casual comment he made that Miller repeated? Was it taken out of context? Did he regret it? Or did Nicholson choose to stay quiet because the work they created together mattered more than the words that started it all? We never can tell, and this is probably why this story still lingers. Some encounters in Hollywood are remembered for their sparkle, others for the quiet tension they leave behind. Nicholson's next story falls into the second category. 3. David Spade. In the late 1990s, David Spade found himself in a situation he could never have predicted. It was a love triangle that involved Jack Nicholson and his girlfriend at the time, Laura Flynn Boyle. The encounter started innocently enough, with the three spending time together while smoking, but the tension was waiting just under the surface. Spade later recounted that Nicholson, with the bold confidence he was known for, asked Boyle out in front of him. Spade's response was quiet resignation. He literally said, "I've been in this town long enough to know when I'm outranked. You're either gonna go out with him, or you're not." This moment alone shifted the dynamic between him and Boyle in a way that he didn't expect. The story took an unexpected turn when a car accident involving Boyle and Nicholson drew media attention. Spade learned about their growing relationship not through a conversation, but through a call from the National Enquirer. That public confirmation of a private shift brought an added sting to an already awkward situation. What might have been a private disappointment instead became a moment amplified by the glare of attention, forcing Spade to process personal betrayal under the scrutiny of the press. Even with the humiliation, Spade approached the ordeal with a mixture of humor and disbelief. In interviews, he reflected on the events with a casual honesty, pointing out how surreal it all felt. His take revealed how intertwined personal and professional worlds can be in Hollywood, where private feelings are constantly subject to public observation. What happened between him, Boyle, and Nicholson became a story of power, charm, and the subtle dominance that can appear when a bigger personality enters the room. Boyle later offered her own perspective, suggesting that Nicholson's approach was less confrontational than Spade described. She denied that he had asked her out openly in front of Spade, hinting that the story may have grown in the retelling. "I think certain people like to embellish that for publicity. That never happened." "Never happened," Boyle recalled. Regardless of the details, the incident remained a significant footnote in the lives of all three. A moment that captured the unpredictability of relationships under the spotlight. However, Jack Nicholson himself has not publicly commented on this specific incident. There are no known interviews or statements from Nicholson addressing the situation directly. This lack of public commentary from Nicholson leaves his perspective on the matter unspoken, allowing for speculation based on the accounts of others involved. Looking back, the triangle between Spade, Boyle, and Nicholson illustrates the complicated dance of love and reputation in Hollywood. Even when the accounts differ, the essence of the story stays the same. When we think about it, navigating romance and power in an industry that magnifies every interaction is never simple. The next name on our list isn't exactly about rivalry or jealousy. It's about two strong personalities who couldn't quite share the same space without sparks flying. 2. Marlon Brando, the idol who disappointed. When Jack Nicholson began making waves in the late 1960s, Hollywood was already feeling the shift toward a new generation of actors. His work carried a sharpness that broke from the old traditions and caught everyone's attention. For someone like Marlon Brando, who had dominated the screen for decades, Nicholson represented something new, and not everyone is quick to welcome change. Some reports suggest Brando kept Nicholson at arm's length in those early days, as if he were testing whether this rising star could hold his ground. The tension felt less like open hostility and more like a measuring of one man against another. Nicholson later spoke about this, beginning with a mix of honesty and respect. He admitted that Brando seemed reluctant to discuss his acting at first, which stung a bit for someone who had looked up to him for years. At first, he thought of me as a threat to his home. He was strictly against dope, and he thought I was a criminal. Nicholson once told the Bulletin, "You know, Nicholson admired Brando long before they met, and feeling that coldness made their first encounters memorable. It was as if he had stepped into the presence of a hero, only to find that he still had to prove himself." This kind of early distance can shape how you view someone forever. And for Nicholson, it added a complicated edge to the admiration he already had. Over time, though, that admiration never faded. Nicholson continued to call Brando one of the greatest actors who ever lived. When Brando passed away, Nicholson's tribute was beyond casual praise. He wasn't talking about a fellow actor. He was honoring someone who had redefined what acting could be. The contrast between their early tension and Nicholson's lasting reverence for Brando shows how layered their relationship was. Their one big collaboration, The Missouri Breaks, gave them a chance to share the screen and put their approaches to the test. Brando's process was famously unpredictable. He used cue cards, improvised lines, and found new ways to surprise both his co-stars and himself. Nicholson, who thrived on focus and emotional consistency, reportedly struggled with the disruption this caused. The set had its share of uneasy moments, and though it never turned into a public blow-up, the friction was noticeable. You could feel two different philosophies of acting pulling in opposite directions, which gave the film an odd energy that still stands out today. Accounts from the production talk more about challenges than outright fights. Brando's unpredictability forced everyone around him to stay alert. Some found it thrilling, others found it draining. Nicholson was known to value precision, and when Brando threw curveballs, it could throw off that rhythm. Even so, those moments didn't create lasting bitterness between them. If anything, they showed the cost of putting two strong-willed artists into the same creative space and letting them push each other's boundaries. Their story shows how two legends in Hollywood could stand on opposite ends of a creative spectrum and still leave behind a shared influence that shaped generations after them. Now, if you thought Nicholson's dynamic with Brando was fascinating, wait until you hear about the next name at the top of this list. Their story takes things in a completely different direction. 1. Ray Winstone. When Martin Scorsese assembled the powerhouse cast of The Departed, it felt like a meeting of heavyweights. The film delivered raw energy on screen, with Jack Nicholson, who played Frank Costello, dominating scenes, and Ray Winstone, who played Mr. French, bringing an edge of menace to the screen. Behind the camera, though, things weren't nearly as seamless. Winstone later admitted that he and Nicholson did not click, a short phrase that hints at a bigger story of quiet clashes and growing tension on set. It sounded like two personalities that refused to find common ground. Winstone has been surprisingly frank about the experience, speaking about it in interviews with the kind of blunt honesty that grabs attention. He called Nicholson arrogant and very rude, words that were a lot because Winstone has built his career on toughness and authenticity, not Hollywood gossip. He even pointed out small gestures and comments, like Nicholson's smarmy little side mouth and sarcastic cracks, which he said felt aimed at him. It was more than professional friction. It was personal. The tension hit a deeper nerve when Winstone claimed Nicholson was disrespectful to his wife when she visited the set. He later revealed that moment nearly pushed him over the line. In one of his most memorable quotes about the experience, Winstone said that if Nicholson had been a younger man, he would have definitely knocked him out. It's the kind of remark that stops you in your tracks because you can hear the sting of it years later. Still, there was no public blow-up or behind-the-scenes meltdown for the tabloids to grab onto. The story remains mostly one-sided, told from Winstone's point of view. Nicholson never responded publicly, leaving the account standing on its own and adding a layer of mystery. Without Nicholson's version, audiences are left to wonder how much of this tension simmered during filming. Even with those moments of strain, Winstone has admitted that Nicholson is fantastic at what he does. Their rocky working relationship didn't ruin the production or dull the intensity of their performances. If anything, that real-life tension may have added extra fire to their scenes together, giving audiences something that felt more visceral and believable. Watching the film now, it's hard not to imagine that some of the grit on screen came straight from their real feelings. What lingers years later is not a single dramatic incident, but the weight of an unresolved relationship. There were words, there was frustration, and there was a sense that the two never fully saw eye to eye. This tension, still hanging in the air, makes their story more compelling. It leaves you wondering, when two strong personalities clash on a set, what exactly is stronger? Is it the film they create, or the grudge itself? We never can tell. The rebel who ruled Hollywood. Jack Nicholson's story didn't start like most Hollywood legends. He was born in 1937 in Neptune, New Jersey, into a family with a secret that would stay hidden for years. He grew up believing his mother was his older sister and that his grandparents were his parents. This truth didn't come out until decades later, long after Nicholson had become a household name. It's the kind of revelation that makes you wonder if that early confusion gave him the edge that would set him apart for the rest of his life. The intriguing part is that school didn't turn him into a star either. At Manasquan High in New Jersey, Nicholson wasn't a standout student chasing trophies or applause. He worked summer jobs, did what he had to do to get by, and kept moving. Something in him must have been restless because he eventually left for Los Angeles, where he took on anything that paid the bills. He didn't arrive with instant fame. No one was waiting with open arms or studio contracts. He started small, working in B-movies, taking whatever roles he could get. Those years of low-budget sets and scrappy productions built his work ethic and forced him to find out how far he was willing to go to stay in the game. The hard work finally paid off when Nicholson finally found the right role at the right time. In 1969, audiences saw him in Easy Rider, and everything changed. His screen time wasn't huge, but he made it count. His performance had a spark that felt alive in a way that was new to audiences. He didn't act like he was trying to fit in, he acted like he couldn't care less about fitting in. That raw energy turned heads in Hollywood and left people wondering what he'd do next. Well, that answer came quickly. In 5 Easy Pieces, Nicholson became the face of a generation questioning the rules. His character refused to play along with society's idea of success, and viewers couldn't look away. Nicholson wasn't trying to be a polished star. He was honest, rough-edged, and willing to play characters that made people uncomfortable. This was part of his power, and he made you feel something, even when what you felt wasn't easy. As the years went on, Nicholson built a reputation for intensity. Some co-stars said he could be demanding, even difficult to work with. He had a habit of pushing for scenes to feel authentic, even if it meant redoing lines or pushing boundaries on set. He seemed drawn to characters who were messy, broken, or morally complicated, Roles in Chinatown, The Last Detail, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest showed that he wasn't afraid of darkness. People began to realize he was more than an actor. He was someone who thrived on exploring the edges of human behavior. And once you noticed that, you started to see how unpredictable he could be off-screen too. What set Nicholson apart was how he combined that wild side with undeniable presence. He could take on morally gray roles and still make the audience root for him. It wasn't about playing heroes or villains. He lived somewhere in between, which made every performance feel dangerous in a good way. This is exactly what made Hollywood pay attention. A lot of actors want to be rebels, but Nicholson turned rebellion into an art form, and people couldn't stop watching. Even as the years passed, Nicholson refused to be boxed in as just a movie star. He kept choosing projects that challenged him and kept people guessing. Whether it was a dark comedy, a thriller, or a psychological drama, he seemed to enjoy surprising audiences. He wasn't chasing fame so much, and this unpredictability made him fascinating to watch and impossible to ignore. By the time Nicholson hit his later years, he had nothing left to prove. He'd won Oscars, made box office history, and become one of the most recognized faces in film. Yet, there was still a piece of that boy from New Jersey in him. The one who didn't know who his parents were and never stopped figuring himself out. Maybe that's why he stayed interesting, even when he could have coasted on past success. Nicholson wasn't built to coast, and maybe that's what made him the rebel who ruled Hollywood. For every breakthrough role and standing ovation, there was a price to pay. Success in Hollywood has a way of revealing shadows, and Nicholson's journey was no exception. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. To enjoy more content like this, tap on the next video on your screen.